Hello, and welcome to the Take the Stage podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Alvarez, and I'm on a mission to help make diversity more of a reality for lower and middle market private equity and credit firms. Take the Stage celebrates and amplifies diverse voices within the lower and middle market private investment space and serves as a platform for conversations that encompass a wide range of perspectives and experiences. Make sure you subscribe to hear candid conversations that touch on career paths, the not-so-linear kind, valuable insights, practical advice for how to navigate your career, and honest stories of how to pave a path in the lower and middle markets. Today on Take the Stage, we are joined by Peter Washington. Peter is a seasoned credit investment professional with over 20 years of experience serving middle market borrowers. He currently serves as managing director and head of Originations for the Copia Group, a diverse founded and led firm serving the lower middle market. Peter has extensive experience in all phases of the credit investment process, with industry experience spanning manufacturing, consumer, healthcare, business services, and the technology sectors. Thank you for joining me, Peter. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's just jump right in. So please, take the stage.
Pleasure to meet you, Alexis. I have listened to your podcast a number of times. I think you have a great perspective of the market, and you have a great network and people who come onto your show that add a lot of value. So very appreciative of being here with you today.
Thank you for your very kind words. I like the way that you've opened up the way how you've taken the stage. Don't get that too often, so thank you.
Oh, no, absolutely. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a credit and investment professional. I'm starting my 23rd year of being in the credit and lending business. And I've had a number of different stops along my journey. Really goes all the way back to 2002 as I was graduating from Florida A&M University. I went from Tallahassee, Florida to New York City to take a capital markets business with Bank of America, where I spent roughly 2 years there. Bank of America transferred me to Chicago, where I joined their interest rate derivatives business and enjoyed that. But I was away from credit and lending and investing. And I knew there was something that I was missing. It was a desire to get back into the credit side. I worked to get back in there. I ultimately interviewed with other banks that were in Chicago, got introduced to the credit lending team at the Northern Trust Company. And I took a role to get back into lending in Chicago. And it was a fantastic journey being at a bank and doing direct lending. It's bank lending, which is a little nuanced from private credit. It was a really good experience there. I did go to grad school at the University of Chicago. I had the pleasure and also the challenge of going during the great financial crisis from 07 to 09. The good news is that you have a shelter while the great financial crisis is happening, but also you have to find a job at the end of your tenure at school, which was doubly challenging coming out in 09. But I was successful in getting introduced to a private credit lending group by the name of CapX Partners. And I joined them in June of 09, right after graduation. And I spent a total of 14 years with that group. And during my journey with CapX, I had various experiences rising through the ranks as a senior associate and underwriter. In underwriting really half of the book that we invested. I was promoted to vice president and was given business development responsibility and was out in the market developing relationships, earning business, getting term sheets signed, funding and closing those deals. And then I was promoted again and took a managerial position and built out the portfolio management side of the business for CapX. And I did that for a number of years as well. And during my time as that manager in the portfolio management business, I was given credit authority. So I was one of kind of the signatories for credit decision making. I was, working for a fund, and it's a partnership. I was one of two non-partners given the responsibility of making those decisions. So that was very much a accomplishment. So I spent 14 years there. Actually, a good friend of mine, a person who I met at the Northern Trust Company, who is an executive there, he was running the asset management business, $1.3 trillion business. He ultimately decided to start a new chapter of his career. He decided to found an investment management business where the first product that he was launching was private credit. So once he had announced that, it didn't take long for us to reconnect and us to decide that we should be working together in concert to grow this market.
All right. Perfect. So what I want to do now is kind of, before we get into like the nitty gritty of where you are right now in your career, because I talk to a ton of young folks and you just laid out something that sounded very linear and very clean. And we all know that very rarely is it so simple, and very rarely do we have a really clear idea of what it is that we want, especially when we are in college or when we're, early on in our careers. So, you didn't go to a target school. Are you from Tallahassee, or is that just where you went to school?
Just where I went to school. So I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. There was a couple of, requirements that I had for pursuing undergrad: get a quality education, 2, create an opportunity for me to have internships, real life experience, and 3, I wanted to get away from home. And I literally had a 2-state minimum. I wanted to be a little distance away from my hometown. Florida A&M and Tallahassee met all 3 of those requirements. I never looked back after that.
I thought you were going to say weather. Because being from the Midwest, I know the love-hate relationship that Midwesterners have with the weather. I for sure thought that you were going to say that, but not the case.
I tell everybody that going this class in tank tops and flip-flops was definitely a benefit.
Yeah.
I look fondly on those days, and I think in another 20 years that I might be looking at retirement.
I get it.
I might be headed back to Florida.
I get it. All right. So you go to a non-target school, and at what point do you realize that this is the path that you ultimately, want to take? Because that, it's very rare that, like I said, that we have, your idea when you're 18 and you're looking at universities is like, I want to get as far away from home, and I want to go to school. But very few times do I encounter college students that, especially like in their freshman years, that really have their trajectory really clearly thought out. So at what point did you have the thought to maybe pursue this path, and kind of what led you to New York? Because I think that's the part that, when we look at how do we get more folks into this space, especially like diverse talent, obviously a lot of them don't have that exposure. It doesn't sound like maybe you had that exposure early on. So tell us a little bit about that piece.
It's a really good question. So I'll go into my thinking. So 1, I always knew I wanted to be in business, and that came from an early age. I would probably say as early as 5, 6, 7 years old.
Wow.
Part of that was the influence of my parents. So my mother was an accountant and my father was an entrepreneur. And he had a couple of businesses, but when I was really in my formative years, he had a bar and restaurant, also was partial nightclub. It had a little bit of everything. But I can remember being very aware that he was an entrepreneur, right? I didn't know the word entrepreneur, but I knew that when I told adults what he did, I always remember there was a certain reaction that I received. It was excitement about what my father did. And that in turn drove me to learn and understand kind of exactly what he did and how he did it. So business was very much always part of the conversation in the house and along the dinner table. So there was always this desire to pursue business. Now, I can tell you that I didn't have an exact appreciation for what corner of business I would find myself in. And I can tell you when I was in high school, going to Wall Street was not a goal of mine. I didn't even understand Wall Street. I didn't have a lot of awareness of it or the magnitude of that market. But I knew I wanted to go into business. I knew that Florida A&M had a fantastic business school. It was called the School of Business and Industry. And I can tell you, experiences and engagement in networks have always informed me on my next move. So I could tell you, I was in high school, I was a senior. The dean of Florida A&M's business school was doing a tour in the Midwest. She came to Cleveland. I had a reception in downtown Cleveland and invited a bunch of high-achieving students who had expressed interest in Florida A&M University. And there she was. Her name was Dr. Sybil Mobley, really a legend. She got on the stage and she just said, look, if you come to my school, you come under my tutelage, we're going to give you all the education you need. We're going to make sure you have the right internships, and we're going to make sure you get a full-time job when you graduate. It was huge. Yeah. Huge. Good. I would apply. I was accepted into NYU's business program as well, but that interaction was priceless. So it really wasn't a hard decision for me to make to go down there. And even when I was there, as I started matriculating through the business school, I got introduced to the idea of Wall Street really by my roommate. My roommate, he had the fortunate benefit of actually having work experience, internships in high school, and even after his freshman year in college with a company called Goldman Sachs. And I had no idea. I never heard of Goldman Sachs before. But as I started to learn more, he shared his experiences that kind of informed me on what that corner of the business world was about. And I also remember my first finance class. It was with a professor. His name was Larry Frieder, a fantastic guy. He taught so many people finance. And I just remember doing bond math. And it just made sense. I really enjoy. I've always had a certain level of comfort with numbers. And that was a great experience. I also remember taking a banking and finance class where teams had to run a bank. We had this simulator. It was a grad level class, and I was one of the only undergrads to be in this class. And I just remember just really enjoying making interest rate decisions and competing with my classmates to see if we could kind of win by being the most profitable bank. Now, we actually blew up our bank, so we didn't win, but we had to explain our rationale, which we did succeed in understanding our mistakes. But all those experiences kind of informed me that finance was a place to be. And again, I just had an interest in lending. But after I got into lending, even my first 18 months on the trading floor, and again, I would say that there's a couple things I learned. One, as I thought back, I said, well, where can I really stake my claim in this world, in this finance world? And I said to myself, well, I'm in this credit business. And truth be told, credit and lending. It literally is one of the oldest industries in the world. And I said to myself, if you can really find a niche here, you'll never be out of a job. I made that assessment it was 2002, 2002, 2003. It has still held true. I think for me, it was trying to find the right roles and getting the right experiences to go where I needed to go.
When we think about our careers and like how we ended up to where we are, there's always a very defining moment where we realize this is it. This is the path, or this is where I'm supposed to be. What was that for you?
Yeah, that's great. And I would counter with maybe not a defining moment, but I can think about defining milestones that I had that really, I think, strengthen my desire to go on further and to do more and to be more in this space. So the one milestone was just recognizing the power of underwriting and being able to break down income statements and balance sheets. So this goes back to my early days, this is 02, 03 on the trading floor. In the trading floor, there's status, right? So you have traders likely have the most status on trading floors. These are usually the ones who make the final decisions, right? And the world revolves around them and the markets they're making. But one thing I noticed was that the best traders, either A, were formerly research analysts, or they had a great appreciation and respect for those and those research analysts that can inform them on the direction of where credit was moving. And of course, they had the skill set to be able to make markets and time markets, whatever it might be, to make those trades profitable. But it was that knowledge And everybody didn't have that ability. So that kind of informed me. I'm like, well, I wanted to learn how to break down income statements and balance sheets on my own. I wanted to have that knowledge. So I kind of pursued that for some years. And then I had a taste of client engagement. And I can remember distinctly working on a project in Miami, Florida, and sitting at the table with some clients. I had a chance to hear the story of this client. And this was a family that was originally from Cuba. Their father had come to the U.S. 20 years before. It started with nothing. Ultimately started providing services for parties and entertainment, built tents and things of that nature to help provide kind of outdoor entertainment. And the business just continued to grow and grow. When I first met them, their business was, it had been going on for 20, 25 years. That guy's children were now running the business, and they were managing events for MTV, the PGA Tour. So they're still doing it today. If you see the VMAs that are happening in Miami, you see big PGA tournaments happening. Most likely, they are one of the players doing it. But the story of entrepreneurship is really told through those banking relationships. Many of these groups, they need banking accounts. They need access to working capital. They need access to term loans. They need wealth management services. So me being a part of those conversations was very exhilarating. And that continued my journey. That was around 2006. And then I can think about 2013 when I closed my first deal all on my own. This was a deal that I sourced independently, underwrote independently, gained the credit approval from my team, and we closed this transaction. The exhilaration of being able to go from soup to nuts and be able to put that company in our portfolio, right, was really exciting. And I will tell you that being my first transaction was an amazing deal, because we first met that business. They were making $5 million in revenue and $1 million of EBITDA. And Alexis, I can tell you, in 2019, the company went public.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So being on the front lines in the early days and watching a business grow tremendously, right? Very fulfilling. Those are the experiences that have informed me and have I think kept me going and kept my interest in this business for so many years.
I love the way that you told this story. And you said something, and I wrote it down, because you said the power of underwriting, and I've never heard anyone say that before, right? And that's how I can really tell you love what you do. When I talk about recruitment, I get very excited. I'm like, I love knowing that, because what I do, we have two sets of clients. You have your candidates and you have your, the firms that I work with, and you're solving a problem for both of them, is how I see it. And when I'm working with candidates, for me, it's something I'm helping them to make a move. It's not a simple move, right? It's not just a move. I mean, it affects their livelihood. It affects their families and their, sometimes their mental well-being. I mean, there's so many components, obviously everything that goes along with a job. But that's one of the most gratifying and fulfilling pieces of my job. And so I always talk about that, like the power of recruitment and the power of, being able to connect candidates with the right firms. You said that and it really sank in, and then you explained everything and what that impact is for the people that you're working with and their businesses. I mean, obviously, in this space, this is, especially lower middle market and middle market, which for me is where the magic is, because that's really the engine of local, communities and the economy, et cetera. So that was something that really I had to write that down, because I just loved that you said it. And because now I'm going to pay attention to that when I interview candidates. I'm going to see, we're going to talk about the power of underwriting, because I've never heard it expressed like that. So that's how I know you're legit in love with what you do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm lucky in those regards.
Yeah. No, well, 100%. Well, let's move a little bit further. Let's fast forward, because you have now embarked on a new adventure. And so let's talk a little bit about where you are right now, because there are a lot of players in this space. Tell us a little bit about the Copia Group and maybe what sets this firm apart from some of the other traditional lending firms out there.
Yeah. Well, the Copia Group, we were founded in 2022. I'll tell you, we were founded on 3 core beliefs. And those 3 core beliefs really inform everything we do, how we're organized, how we recruit, and how we position ourselves in the market. I'll share those 3 beliefs. So one is we believe that there are boundless opportunities in the lower middle market. And Alexis, I'll tell you how we define the lower middle market. So we define the lower middle market are businesses with EBITDA between $1 and $20 million. So truly the lower end of the middle market. And if I would be very, very direct with you, I would tell you that we have a special interest of working with businesses with EBITDA between 1 and 5. And Alexis, the reason is because we believe that market has been completely vacated by many of our competitors. All right. So if you look at the banking world, if you go back to 1994 and you looked at the percentage of middle market deals that banks held, it was 70%. Right? So if you look at most recently, I think the last statistics were for 2020, that share has gone down to 10%. So they've really dropped significantly in their representation of that lower middle market. A lot of that was driven by the great financial crisis and kind of the aftershock of that, and how the regulators and the Fed had beefed up capital requirements for banks. But that's where we're at. So we just think that there are boundless opportunities by focusing on the lower middle market. And also, I would be remiss to say that if you look at the private credit shops, many of our direct competitors, the ones that were founded in the late 90s, the aughts, the teens, many of those groups have been very, very successful. And they've raised billions of dollars. And they just can't afford to work with and work on those smaller business opportunities because they have to do volume. They have to put 20, 30, 40, $50 million to work per transaction, which leaves many of these lower middle market deals without a deep bench of lenders that are waiting to cater to them. So we just think there's great opportunities there. That's our first belief. Our second belief is that entrepreneurs are truly underserved. So when we think about entrepreneurs, we think about 3 different types of entrepreneurs. There's your traditional entrepreneur. You have your family-owned business. So in addition to entrepreneurship, you've got multi-generational or family considerations to underwrite as well. And the third are the independent sponsors, fundless sponsors, entrepreneurship through acquisition. There's many terms for this market. These are entrepreneurs that have certain level of experience in investments and making private and alternative investments, but they're just not associated with a fund. We think of them as entrepreneurs too, and we spend a lot of time with them as well. So those are the 3 types of entrepreneurs we spend a lot of time with. The one group that we spend less time on, and I would just say that we de-emphasize the relationship, is focusing on private equity or your dedicated funds. We think it's a great market. We believe that these are really good, highly talented people. But we also know that there's a lending industry that is being created that caters to this market. And for us, we're trying to serve the underserved. So we spend a little bit more time on entrepreneur as opposed to the well-served private equity alternatives fund side of the business. The third belief that we have is that people of diverse background and women are truly underserved when it comes to access to credit. Now, it's not just conjecture, Alexis. If you look at the Fed and if you look at the credit approval rates, if you look at the amount of capital that is offered when credit approval is given and granted, it is significantly lower than the national average for those both demographics. And if you look at the Copia Group, if you look at our decision-making group, right, there's 4 of us. 3 out of the 4 of us are of diverse background. 1 is a woman. We are uniquely qualified to bridge those gaps for diverse-owned and women-owned business owners. It's not the only thing we do, but it's something that we want to be recognized in the market for doing.
Awesome. This is my jam because this is what I do. But have you encountered, because, we know that it's a hot topic and everyone has an opinion. Do you feel that you get at some point, maybe not, but what's your take in terms of getting pushback, or because there's a lot, like we know there's a lot happening. Have you guys felt any of that?
Really good question. We have a similar market dynamic that you have, as in there are kind of two markets that we're serving. We have to kind of work and cater to. So we have on the fundraising side, right? We have investors and prospective investors who we kind of interact with and we raise funds from, right? We have to spend time there. And then on the other side, we have prospective borrowers, and we're marketing and pitching ourselves and trying to differentiate ourselves from other folks, right? So those are the two markets. So I would tell you that from our perspective, we are who we are. Our mandate is our mandate. And our job, our role, is to find the LPs and find the borrowers in which that resonates with. Right? So for borrowers, we'll focus on LPs, right? The things that we offer are, one, we have a position on the lower middle market. We're really marketing our ability to source meaningful, profitable investment opportunities in the lower middle market. We're looking to deliver a healthy risk-adjusted return for those opportunities. We're offering seasoned management experience. If you look at our leadership team, we have over 130 years of combined credit, lending, investment management experience. And by the way, we just happen to be one of the most diverse groups in the market. And just by the way, we happen to focus on delivering access to capital to underserved borrowers. So, and that's going to resonate with people, certain people. Yeah, those things are going to resonate. And our job is to find who that resonates with. And same thing on the other side for borrowers, right? Who we are, what we do. Again, lower middle market, focusing on entrepreneurs, providing true access to capital for diverse-owned and women-owned businesses. You kind of find the groups and the investors and the borrowers who our story and our value proposition resonates with. Our role is not to be political. We're not a political organization. We're a business organization.
Yeah, I 100% understand, and we're totally on the same page. And what you effectively just described is what I call building the tribe, and it's the tribe, right? Because it's not your network, because I distinguish between the two. And I have this conversation at least once a week because, your network is important, right? And those are, contacts within the space. But for me, the tribe doesn't necessarily need to be someone that, in this case, like is at a private credit or alternative investment firm. It could be, people that are on the periphery or not even on the periphery, but they share the same vision and they share the same values and believe in diversity and want to see, believe there's room for everyone and that there should be diversity, in terms of perspectives and conversation and dialogue. That to me is the tribe, right? And so, a lot of the times people will ask me, are you going back to that question about pushback that I asked you about? Are you seeing things different, because there's so much noise right now? I'm really not, but I always say I'm incredibly biased. I'm very biased. I am, wholeheartedly 100% proud of being biased in the sense that I have built my tribe and my group of people that we share the same vision. So for me, they want the same thing. They're open to conversations. And, for me, that's really important. And so I like what you said. Like, it's not about being political, because at the end of the day, you're a business and you're a business organization. And if you can't deliver the returns, right, there is no business, essentially, right? So that's the key part, right? And I think that part gets overlooked because you just hear whatever the discourse is, right? But at the end of the day, you have to deliver returns because that's what this is about. This is right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think these perspectives, and I would say these cross currents can be conflated in ways, right? Where we have an absolute view on the market. We have a view on where the opportunity lies. And we have a belief that our unique abilities can really generate meaningful business, meaningful opportunities. It wouldn't be any different from us being technology investors and us focusing on a very specific sector in technology. And guess what? Some people may believe in AI. Some people don't. If you have a credit fund that is focused on AI, their LPs are going to be self-selected. They'll say, well, look, we actually believe in the same thing you do. We believe AI is the future, and we're going to back you. They're very similar, I think, decision-making processes. Just, again, and of course, there's also these political aspects too. Like, is AI good? Is AI bad? I think LPs are going to be informed that they're going to make their decisions. They're going to invest their dollars where their beliefs lie.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. I could probably go on and on this particular point, but I won't because otherwise we'll be here forever. But I want to start kind of moving into what I always find really interesting. Well, I mean, I find everything interesting. But another interesting point that I don't think gets a lot of attention. And this is more on kind of the personal side. I want to take the conversation to kind of work-life balance and family, because I think it's incredibly important for men to have these conversations, because I have a ton of these conversations with women. And Peter, you can't imagine how many young women that haven't even graduated college yet that question whether there is a space for them, or whether this is the alternative investment space is the right space for them, and if there's a place for them, and if they're actually going to be able to build a career, because they're always left with that idea that I'm going to have to choose between family and career. And I'm of the belief that we need to have more men involved in that conversation because it is a male-dominated industry. And until we have more voices from men that are really kind of helping to move the conversation along, I think it's going to be baby steps until we see meaningful change. So when we were planning the show, I mean, we know, we each have 3 kids. We're dealing with the challenges of preteens and everything that comes with parenting. We are both married, which is, high five, because we're still married and we're going on. I'm going on, it's going to be 14 years for me this year.
Congratulations.
So we got to celebrate those. Because we're, and I still like my spouse. I mean, that's key. That's important.
After almost 14 years, that is an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it's right. And, in this space, we know there's a lot of divorce. I mean, in general, right? And so I want to talk about how you have managed to balance your professional life and those ambitions with your commitments to your wife and to your children.
Yeah. It's a really good question. It's a really important question to ask. I'll answer it this way. One, there was life before, I would say, a committed relationship like marriage and with kids. And I'll tell you, I definitely was one of those first in, last out, wouldn't mind put in work on the weekends type of employee. But that was a phase of my life where I was really trying to learn and grow, improve. And I think there's a space for that, right, for any young person. I would actually encourage folks to really dive deep, especially when you don't have as many commitments. If you can really gain a skill set and have a perspective, right, you can go a long way. You can be very valuable to your organization. But as I transition into married life and then fatherhood, there's a couple things that I would say that were very, very helpful. And some of these were just happenstance, but in retrospect, very, very valuable. So one, I was with the right group of leaders that also valued family and relationships. So when I was at CapX Partners, it was actively communicated that, again, the leadership team, they too were happily married and active parents. They made space for themselves to to engage and to have a life. And they also create a space for their employees to do that. And I will tell you, that was just pure luck that I ended up working with some really good guys and leaders who really believed in that. And I will tell you, all of them were married when I first joined. They are still married today. They have adult children who are all successful in their own ways. Very, very powerful for me to see that in business leaders. I've also been very, very blessed to join the Copia Group, who have very similar values as valuing the relationships outside of the workplace and making time and creating time for their spouse and for their children. If I, as the next generation, I would say that you should be very mindful of who you work with and the culture that they create and that they foster. And I will tell you, if you don't have a leadership team that not only just talks it, but also allows, I would suggest that you try to find it. Doesn't necessarily have to be immediate, as in I'm giving my 2 weeks notice, but there are always inflection points. There are always opportunity sets where you're going to make a pivot. And I would say make that a consideration on your next pivot.
I love that entire answer because I love to hear it from a man because we don't hear it from men. We hear that a lot from women. I feel like I'm preaching all the time exactly the same thing that you just said, where build the tribe, find those people, cultivate those relationships. And it takes time, right? I mean, you were lucky, but most people are not lucky in that sense, right? To have leadership that aligns in terms of vision and values. And so if you don't have that, and of course, there's certain times in your life, right? Like when you're early on in your career, maybe it's not necessarily a priority, but as I know, like from speaking with so many women in this space, you get to a point where you start looking farther down the road and you really look, sometimes it looks really bleak. And so, I really tell them like, no, you have to go out. They exist. I tell them, every managing director or partner that I know, has a family. Many of them are married, not all, many of them are married. Yeah. And so they do. I mean, they're out there and they balance their lives. I mean, we're going to tell you, any working parent, regardless of what space you're in, is hard. It's hard to be a working parent. I mean, you're not going to have, it's not going to be rosy everywhere, right? But I mean, it does exist. And so it's really important to seek that out. And I really like that you said that, you have to be mindful of the people that you work with and make sure that they align in terms of values. You've given lots of advice throughout this recording. Any last kind of piece of advice when you look back at your career, what would you perhaps offer, your younger self or any of the aspiring investors out there?
It's a really good question. And as I think about this, there's, I think, 3 pieces of advice that I would share with the next generation. So one is focusing on quality work. So what I mean by that is there's a lot to be gained from doing the work that is asked of you to do and doing it well and building a level of understanding and expertise that can differentiate you within your organization and also within your industry. As a leader myself, as I think about the response that I have from people who deliver quality work, they differentiate themselves. And I've learned that these are folks who I grow to like, trust, and respect. And these are people who I can lean on, right? So just doing quality work is so important. It builds trust and it creates opportunity for you. So sometimes the answer is just do the work and allow that quality work to create opportunity on your behalf, right? That's one. 2, be hungry yet humble, right? So what I mean by that is, right, be hungry. There is nothing wrong with wanting more and doing more. I think it's very healthy. I think it's very healthy to want more and do more. And if you have desires in your career, pursue those. Those are good things. If you have intuitions about a certain market segment or a certain product or companies that operate and do well there, right? Like be hungry, learn more, grow, network, whatever you have to do. But also be humble. as in there's a certain level of expertise that you'll build. There's a certain quality network that you'll create and generate. But you also have to take that knowledge and use those networks, I think, the right way. And I think you have to be humble. You can know your skill set, you can know your work, but at the same time, manage it in a way that is digestible to other people. Because I can tell you from my own experiences, the opportunities go to the people who you want to do business with, right? And you feel the most comfortable with. And I say that there's a certain level of humility, especially as you get more and more skilled in your role and within the industry, that you have to exhibit in order to really gain more opportunity and to build more trust. And then 3, I would just say, bet on yourself. You should always bet on yourself. Let's say there's a new product or a new division that you want to work in. Let's say you don't have the prerequisite experience, right? Create an opportunity and bet on yourself. Sometimes that will come in the form of an unpaid internship. Sometimes that would come in the form of maybe a job that you would initially believe that is below or beneath your skill set, right? But sometimes you just have to bet on yourself. Get in the front door, maybe get in the back door, whatever it takes. Then bet on yourself that you will be able to grow and perform and to earn what is due to you. So I would say that. So again, I think those are the 3 pieces of advice. I mean, I have perspectives over the past 22 years where I think those 3 things, the quality of work, being hungry and humble, and betting on yourself have paid off. I don't think you can go wrong.
100%. That last point, that's a hard point. That's a hard point, especially to understand, I think probably at any point in your career, that bet on yourself. Because I don't think a lot of people understand exactly what that means and the consequences of that, right? Or maybe consequences isn't the right word. The implications that come from that. That one's a tricky one. That's something that like we say because we have perspective. We have 20 years, work experience. And so when you get young folks like who understand that, you're like, okay, like that guy gets it. Yeah. Right. But I like what you said about the hungry and humble, because what I kind of always tell everyone, I told you last week I gave a speech, and I talked exactly about these last 2 things actually. And so being hungry and humble. So always be learning, right? That's the thing, is always be learning. But you have to, in order to always be learning, you have to understand that there's always room to learn. And that's hard to understand when you're older, right? Because we get to a point where we think we know it all, right? And that's a really big mistake, because it's Coach Wooden, actually, I use this quote. It's what you learn after you've learned everything that counts, right? How many people really like use that as like an anchor, right? Because it's very easy for us to say, no, I already know it. And we don't develop ourselves further. And the last part is mindset, because the bet on yourself is mindset. It has to do with being of that mindset that you can, that you will, that this is worth it. And if this is what you really want to do and you are capable of doing it, right? That a lot of it has to do with that. And letting go of the fear. So I really love that you touched on that, because we encounter, or I at least encounter that all the time with candidates and with clients when, in different kind of situations. But no, I love that.
Well, Alexis, you say that, and it's, I told in a lot of ways could be a very linear story, but if you go back to these inflection points, going to a non-target school, make it to Wall Street, graduating from grad school in the worst job market in 40 years, finding an opportunity, right? So there's these concepts of quality work, being humble and hungry, and betting on yourself. I mean, those were lifesavers. This was definitely not a straight linear process for me to get where I've been. They've been valuable, and hopefully the advice will be valuable to the next generation.
Yes, and I think it's important that we emphasize that it's not easy, right? Because the way that we've told it, that you tell your story, and again, it sounds like it's really easy. And there are moments in our lives, right? In our careers where I'm sure you question, like, what am I doing? Or why is this so hard? Or it should be easier. I mean, those are natural questions, right?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
That's part of the journey, right? Yeah, but so I just find myself thinking back to when I was younger, and I relive it because I talk to so many, associate level, senior associate level people, and it's hard to understand at that point of your career, right? That you have to. That's why we do this podcast, so that so we can share and impart those lessons with them.
That's right. I mean, at some point, if you listen to your conversations, your internal dialogue, right? There's a point in time where, early on in my career, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Can I make it? This is so hard, right? Or, what's got to happen for this to be successful? Man, that's a dead end. Where do I go? How do I do it? It's interesting because there was a point in time where things flipped, and it was like, you've achieved so much.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out. Keep going. Right?
Yeah.
You'll work it out. When was the last time you failed? When was the last time you didn't bounce back? Right? Those conversations change. And I think that's where, again, just experience and maturity, you really, you hope you can get to that point where those internal discussions change.
All right, Peter. Well, I've loved this conversation because we've checked a lot of what really kind of just tickles me for conversations. We've talked about career path and the curvy and the nonlinear kind, and we've talked about diversity in this space and the fantastic work that the Copia Group is doing. And we've talked about work-life balance from a man's perspective, and we have solid advice to all those that are following in your footsteps. So for me, this is a fantastic episode. So thank you so much for taking the stage, and you are welcome anytime to come back.
Oh. Alexis, I'm just delighted that you've given me the opportunity to be on your platform. I honor what you do, and I'm wishing you nothing but success.
Thank you. Likewise. I can't tell you how much I appreciate those words.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to Take the Stage. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To hear past shows, please go to our website, career-rockstars.com. If you're a company or candidate who would like to work with Career Rockstars, reach out on LinkedIn or send an email to alexis@career-rockstars.com. Thanks again, and until next time.